Okay, good morning, everyone, and happy Saturday. Before we get the session started, I just want to introduce myself and discuss some housekeeping items. So I am Tiaja, and I'm actually the lead family resource navigator here at CAA Health. And the session you are in today is recognizing privilege and entitlement and the impact that that has on our mental health. So Tonoa is going to be our presenter. And just really quick, I want to go ahead and talk about some of the technical housekeeping items. So you can find the chat box at the bottom of your screen. And you can select all panelists. If you're having any technical issues, we do have a session support person who will be able to assist you. And then you can also chat to everyone in the group. I would say just consider that Tonoa can't see you during her presentation, so really try and interact and engage and ask questions through the Q&A or through the chat, whichever works better. And she will answer as many questions as she can, either throughout the session or at the end as well. So if you have any questions that you want to wait until the end to go over, that is completely fine. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and let Tonoa get this started.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for being in my session today. I really appreciate it. Happy Saturday to you all. We're going to dive right in. The session is called Recognizing Privilege and Entitlement and the Impact it has on our mental health. So this is what to expect out of today's session and your time with me. We're going to connect a little bit. I'll introduce myself a little bit further in depth and kind of set some expectations around safe space and brave space. And then I'll have a question for you all. We'll talk about privilege and entitlement and understanding the difference between both of them. What does it mean to own your own privilege? And we'll watch a video from Michael Yates around recognizing privilege. And then we're going to talk about recognizing white privilege, what it is, why it affects others, and offering brave spaces in that. And then we'll tie it all together to mental health. And we'll talk a little bit about the 5 faces of oppression and how all of this affects your mental capacity. So again, my name is Tonoa Manuel. I currently am a clinical case manager at the Mental Health Center of Denver. I work on the prevention team, which is the healthy living team. I'm also the owner and curator of SIG Consulting. I love this work. I love to talk about racial justice, DEI work, public health. It's all my wheelhouse. It's a lot of the work that I've done and a lot of the studying I've done. I held a bachelor's in project management and a master's in criminal justice with the emphasis in restorative practices. I am a mother of 3. They are here with me. Hopefully they act right today for me. But I am a mom of 3. I have a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 6-year-old. I'm also a wife. I am from Denver, lived here until I was 15, and then moved to St. Louis, Missouri, where I lived for about 13 years, and I have been back in Denver for the last 6. So setting expectations, I just want you guys to know that in this space, anything you say in the chat, any question you ask, I'm not offended. This is a space where you can ask those questions and feel comfortable doing so. I want you to be vulnerable. And in this session, I will also be vulnerable. In true leadership, there's vulnerability. So I'm definitely going to exude that and ask that of you guys. Even though I can't see you, I definitely want you to be as involved as possible. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Participation is huge, so drop whatever you need to in the chat. And again, ask questions. During this session, I always want you guys to connect to your why. Like, why are you here in this space? Why do you show up in the work that you do? Why is today important? Why is this session important? I want you guys to be brave and know the difference between being brave and standing up for what you believe in, and versus feeling safe, meaning that in this presentation, again, it's confidential what you say and how you feel. So first thing that I want to know is tell me your name and your organization that you come from in the chat. It's so awkward not seeing y'all. So just I'm rooting for everyone to just comment. Hello, Lisa. Hello, Julie. Hello, Meredith. Hey, Zanetta. Hey, Sheila. Hey, Angela. Hey, Anna. Hey, James, Carmen, Cheryl. Well, welcome. Thanks for taking time out of your Saturday to be here with me and my session. I, again, really appreciate it. Hey, Gwendolyn. Hey, Ken. All right, so in this moment, also in the chat, I want you guys to tell me, why are you showing up in this space today? Why are you here? Why are you here with me? Why are you here for this Black Health Summit? Lay it on me. Don't y'all all type at one time. Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Annetta. Absolutely, Ken. So we have people saying learn and grow, support. Oh man. Better person, recognizing white privilege, getting my perspective on responding to white privilege actions versus Black culture practices. All right, y'all, I hope I can show up in all those capacities today. If you need anything or I didn't touch on anything, definitely message me, email me, what have you. And just thanks again for being in this space and being vulnerable today. All right, let's get started. Let's jump in. So my next question, and I want you guys to practice this in whatever work you do or whomever you communicate with. We always ask that fictitious, like, how are you doing? And it's so easy for you to be like, oh, I'm good. Oh, it's good. Yeah, great. But I want you to take a minute and answer this question. Like, how is your soul today? How's your soul? It is a question that I ask because it deepens relationships. It allows me to see you in who you are in the now. And again, it goes back to that vulnerable piece. So I can tell you right now, I am feeling a little heavy and powerful at the same time. Right now, we're living in a world where so much around us is impacting us. It's impacting me as a Black woman. So I feel hopeful in all of those things, but definitely still with heavy heart with everything that's going on in our community. So you guys tell me, drop it in the chat. How is your soul this Saturday morning? All right, I can do that. It is a habit I am breaking. Gwen, I'm right there with you. Curious, hopeful. tired and drained, conflicted, undernourished, tired, all valid feelings. And yes, call me out on all my stuff. Someone in the chat said, don't say you guys. It is so a habit that I'm actually actively working on every day to not say. So I definitely will respect women, my own identity, and everything else around that. So I will be more intentional. I love that, Theo, uplifting. I love that this work is good for your soul, Sheila. I have someone saying not sure, and that's okay. That's honesty. All right. So let's jump in. We're going to talk a little bit about the difference between privilege and entitlement. It is totally okay that you're multitasking. I understand that you are here, you're showing up, so I appreciate that. So understanding the difference between privilege and entitlement is really important. I say that because sometimes we think that it's the same thing, and it's definitely not the same thing. So recognizing first that privilege is defined as having special rights, advantages, or immunities. And entitlement is defined as believing oneself is to be inherently deserving of privilege or special treatment. I think in all ways, no matter your walk of life, we all deal with both of these. We all have privilege, we all have entitlement or a sense of entitlement, but how does that affect us? How does that affect the people around us? How are we showing up in that privilege or that entitlement? And how does it come off to others is something that I want you guys to think about throughout this presentation. So recognizing privilege. In order for you to own your privilege, you must recognize that you have the advantage to no fault of your own. Identifying your intersectionalities will help you align who you are in your privilege and how to utilize your privilege in ways that promotes, empowers, uplifts those that don't have the same privilege as you. Asking yourself, how can I promote being more equitable outcomes in societies for my privilege? So for example, I am an able-bodied woman. I am able to walk around and stand up. That is my privilege. That is a privilege that I have. I have a college education. That might also be a privilege, that I can go out and apply for a job. I don't have to think twice if I will be able to get accepted in a position that's asking for a master's degree. Now, the flip side of that is I am a woman with a master's degree. So do I worry about if I will be outnumbered in that or not by someone else who has a similar credential or maybe not have the similar credentialing than me? So drop in the chat right now what privilege you all have. That you are aware of. Love that, Zanetta, working from home, absolutely. College education, class, white, cisgender, educated, working from home, I have a home, master's degree education, retired, cisgender. Keep them coming. I think some of these we don't even think about, right? Like, yeah, I do have a roof over my head. It is a home. It's something that, you know, sometimes we work hard for, but how are we putting that into the universe for everyone else around us? And are we aware of that? Citizenship, English fluency, educated business, Black woman owner, financial security. I love it. So in this chart, this is some examples about privilege in the US. So if you're growing up and you were expected to go to college, you have class privilege. Like if you grew up, went to college, had that accomplishment, like that is considered class privilege, like something I didn't even think that I had. If you're confident that the police exist to protect you, you have white male privilege. Tell me more about that. And I will not, if you don't want me to call you out, I don't have to, but I want to know a little bit more about your soul taking a hit and what you identify as, because I'm going to give you a piece of me a little bit in just a second. So these, again, are just examples of privilege in the US. So right now in this moment in the chat, I want you guys to tell me, when you look at me, if you see me, what do you see? What do you see when you see me? Oh, thank you, Meredith. Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Carmen and Lisa. Thanks, Autumn. Oh my God, if my daughter heard me say your name, she'd come out the room right now because her name's Autumn too. Oh, thanks. I like my sweater. It's one of my favorite ones. Okay, so all of you guys said Black. That was a lot of what you guys said. Black woman, I'm young, I'm passionate about the work I do. I am all of those. I'm all of those. But that's what y'all see me as. So when we recognize privilege and we recognize how we categorize people, we have to give them the space and the opportunity to be able to share all of who they are, right? Like, yes, I am a Black woman, but my mother is Polish, German, and Asian Indian. I never get to say that out loud. Like, I don't get the opportunity. I'm already put into a place, right? And that's fine because I own my Blackness. I am a Black woman. Yes, very much so. When you guys talked about homes, like having a home, I quickly resonated when I didn't have a home. I have been homeless 2 times in my life, and I know exactly what that feels like to have and go without a roof over my head or wondering where my next meal was gonna come from. That's something that I don't get the opportunity to talk about. I can advocate for it, I can speak to it because I've lived in that place, but nobody just thinks that when they see me, right? So those are things that within recognizing your privilege also comes like with understanding some of your oppressions, right? Some things that hold us back in this world around us and being able to acknowledge that. Is everyone tracking with me? Give me like thumbs up. I see people using emojis, so give me the thumbs up or just say you're with me in the chat. So I say those things because I want you guys to understand in the world that we live in, we have to give opportunities. We have to give the opportunity for people to be who they are in their full capacity, like not giving assumptions. That's why I said I appreciated that I was called out by saying, you guys, like, it is a habit. It's a habit that I want to break. And being called out on that is okay. And I will acknowledge it. And I think that's something that we lack when it comes to privilege, is like acknowledging our privilege, acknowledging who we are in the world around us and where we take our place in society. Okay, so a little bit deeper into owning our privilege. So having privilege means that you possess an unearned advantage in society through some aspect of your identity in comparison to those that lack that attribute. Race is a huge privilege that should be acknowledged. Those that say they don't see race are fooling themselves. But we will get to that when we talk about white privilege. In the chat, in all your vulnerability, you do not have to answer if you do not want to. Do you see race? Yes or no? Before I ask that question, do you see race? Do you not see race? Sorry. When you are talking with people, you're in spaces with someone, do you automatically look at race and classify them? Yes, yes, yes. Okay. All right. So class, gender, ability, sexual orientation, age, religion, language, education, citizenship, appearance, and body size are privilege that we don't always recognize, right? Like, I don't always think of me being able to speak English as being a privilege until I talk to someone who English is a second language for them, right? Or the fact that, again, I'm able-bodied. I don't have to worry about a wheelchair ramp, or if I live in an apartment and have to walk up step, I don't have to worry about those things. Those are all privileges. Okay, so next one. So we are gonna watch this video. It was presented by Michael Yates. It's called Recognizing Privilege. It's called Power to All People. And so this quote I pulled out, you'll hear him when he says it. It's so powerful, but it says, "It's no secret that in the United States of America, that people of color are consistently marginalized. It's safe to say that economically, socially, culturally, and in terms of education, we do not hold power or privilege in this country." Based on that statement, before I put this video up, do you agree with that statement? Yes or no? All right, guys and girls, let's see. Wow, Gwen, that's powerful. She said, "I didn't growing up, but I do now." All right, guys, here we go. Oh, habit, gotta break it. Gonna watch it right now.
That face that is usually covered by her phone has finally made an appearance. So if I were arrested, here's what they might say about me on the news. 26-year-old black male, 5'11", dashingly handsome, raised in the inner city by a single mother. Father's been in prison since 1992 on a number of charges. Not much hope for this dude. He did it. That description doesn't look too promising. As a matter of fact, I couldn't use it to claim great power or privilege in American society. Unless we look deeper. See, what you might not know from those few words is that my mother is a multiple-time Teacher of the Year in Houston Independent School District. Her status as a teacher alone afforded me the ability to go to any public school I wanted in the city, so naturally, I achieved the best education in the city of Houston. Furthermore, my mother is a college graduate and has her master's degree in curriculum instruction. And my father, while he has been incarcerated for the majority of my life, attended college at the University of Wisconsin on a full basketball scholarship. My parents' status as college attendees alone means that I am far more likely to have gone to college. And it just so happens that I did. I graduated from this fine institution of higher learning, Texas State University, which is the best university in the world. Yeah, we can clap for that. I'm also finishing my master's in curriculum instruction right now. I have a beautiful, amazing, hot wife, and I have 3 beautiful, amazing children. I'm a teacher myself. I get the chance to inspire and empower students every single day. I am Black, and I love that. And last, I am dashingly handsome. I mean, how you think I got this gig, you know? You see, what you just heard was not a presentation of new information. It was the other side of the rap sheet. It was the same information, just viewed under a different lens. You see, through this different lens, I've been able to claim power for myself by viewing my own identities in a completely different way. It's no secret that in the United States of America, that people of color are consistently marginalized. It's safe to say that economically, socially, culturally, and in terms of education, we do not hold power or privilege in this country. But in the words of my man, my best friend, Barack Obama, yes, we can. I want to introduce you to a concept called the culture of power. The culture of power represents this set of values, beliefs, and ways of acting that unfairly and unevenly privilege certain groups of people based on aspects of their identity. The term culture of power was coined in 1988 by the current executive director for education and innovation at Florida International University, Lisa Delpit. Delpit's original intention with the culture of power was to inform instructional practice to show teachers how to teach students of color. So I adapted her message for my own purposes so that I could empower and transform my classroom while at the same time bringing them together with other students. So I hope today to empower you and help you transform your identity. And in the process, bring this entire room together. Guys, we're gonna kind of operate today like the Oprah Winfrey Show. Everybody today is going home with something and you don't have to check under your seats to get it either. Let me tell you about Chris. Chris is a cool kid with cool hair and cool clothes, and he's got every pair of Jordan sneakers known to man, I swear. He jokes that Michael Jordan one day is gonna invite him to his house as a guest of honor because he's bought so many Jordan sneakers. And the crazy thing is, he's probably right. He's got a lot of J's. I met Chris as he slowly strolled into my summer school government classroom one year. He sits down and he tells me that his greatest dream in life is to go to jail. All summer, I pushed hard with Chris, trying to transform his mindset about himself, to tell him that no, you are not just a poor Mexican kid from Fort Worth. You can change the world. And so that summer, I rolled out my culture of power presentation and experiment on this classroom, hoping that it would change Chris's life. And it did. About halfway through the summer, I was met at my summer school classroom by Chris and his mom, and she had that real concerned mom look on her face. You know, when you failed the test and you went home, you didn't want to tell your mom, but you did anyway. Or when you came home too late from being out with your friends, that concerned mom look. So I knew it wasn't good. Before I could even open the door to the classroom, she started talking, wasting no time and no words. She told me that I was wasting my time trying to convince her son that he could go to college, that he would not go to college, that he was going to play his part, and that did not involve going to college. But I still pushed. I was convinced that Chris would prove his mother wrong, and then he would change the planet. A year ago, I got a phone call from Chris. And he made that phone call from the middle of the Brown University campus. Y'all, he made it. And he told me that the culture of power was the single most important thing that he had ever learned about in school because he finally knew how to see himself different. And he made me promise on that phone that no matter what group of students or people I stood in front of, I would share this message with them. And so you guys are not my students, but I'm gonna keep that promise to Chris today. I'm gonna teach you how to see yourself differently. So I've had the fortune of teaching this lesson in front of two very different audiences. The first was mostly students of color from a Title I public school, and the Title I designation, if you don't know, means that many of them are low income. Then I adapted this to a mostly white private school in the heart of Austin, Texas, where students paid $20,000 a year for tuition. You see, the only difference in teaching the culture of power to these two different groups of people is the angle of the approach. You see, each approach helps one audience see its opposite and understand them better. A great and respected teacher of mine once told me that once we stop pretending to be colorblind and we start really trying to understand one another, we can finally be the human race. Thus, understanding equals unity. And unity is about closing the gaps between diverse groups of people, which means that understanding is a tool that we can use to close the gaps between groups of people. So here's how that works. For the Title I student of color from a public school, closing the gaps looks like telling them, yes, power relationships exist in school and what you guys call the real world. And no, those power relationships often do not advantage people of color. But that doesn't mean that you're doomed. It doesn't mean that you're down and out. You can claim power for yourself over your own identities, which ultimately teaches you what it's like to live with privilege in America, humanizing those who do live with privilege, or white privilege as we can call it, which in the end brings us together because now we understand what it's like to be the same. For the white, affluent, private school kid, closing the gaps for them looks like transforming their relationship with their own privilege. Research pointed out power relationships in the workplace and in education to tell us that those with privilege are the least likely and the least willing to admit that they even have it. Step one, admit that you have privilege. Once that happens, you can start the process of closing the gap between them and their neighbor by understanding what it's like to live without privilege. Once you do this, you'll start to achieve what we call unity. A perfect example of this is a student I teach this year named Sheridan. Sheridan is a white girl, and she goes to a Title I public school, or not Title I public school, she goes to a rich private school where she pays $20,000 a year for tuition. But she stands out in this crowd pretty starkly. You see, Sheridan was born in the Virgin Islands, and she moved to North Carolina, and then to Florida, and now to Austin, Texas. Because she grew up in diverse communities and had her relationship with her privilege transformed on a daily, she leads the way in my classroom as I help my students transform their relationship with their privilege. Just watching one student who gets it is a great example of how we can start to close gaps between you and the person you're sitting next to. So let's do this thing. Let's do this experiment right now. Everyone imagine that you're playing a card game. And you don't know the rules to this card game. At the table where you're sitting, nobody's speaking, but everybody knows the game. They're putting down cards, they're scoring points. And every time you try to ask for the rules, you're scolded. And then there's some annoying dude at the end of the table who writes something that you can't read on a sticky note. Frustrated, you make it through the game. And you get to the end of the round and you lose. Chances are, if you played that game 1,000 times, you would lose every single time. You didn't know the rules. It would be easier if somebody just told you what the unspoken and unwritten rules of the game were. You may have just experienced your first or your 100th time feeling what marginalization feels like. If this is your first time with marginalization, it's safe to say that you live a privileged life. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not going to attack you. Privilege is powerful when you use it to uplift those around you. If you are all too familiar with what it's like to feel marginalized, then you don't have privilege. But you're not helpless either.
All right. Let me know how you guys felt about that in the chat before we talk a little bit about it. How did you feel about this video? Let me see where you are. All right, so I have someone said a lot of truth, familiar experiences, encouraged. I will send the whole chat to you, Jan. Made me want to learn more. In your own personal privilege, you can uplift others. The card game is spot on, absolutely. All right. So before we take a break, I just really want you all to think deep about your own privilege. I also want you to think about how you can shift your mindset and the mindsets of others and start to uplift the things that you feel are of an oppressed state of mind, or where you feel like you may lack somewhere, how you can uplift yourself. We all have power. I absolutely love that he said that. It's something that I personally dealt with and battled with for a long time, when I had to acknowledge that there was a whole another side of me that I didn't even know, or when I had to deal with homelessness, what that was going to look like, how would my friends look at me. And now I'm able to tell a story, right? This is why we say, it's our testimony of where we come from, and being able to flip those negative connotations that people have against us, and use them for our good, use them for a benefit, right? I can go speak to someone around suicidal ideations because I've dealt with that. I can go talk to someone about homelessness. I can talk about identity and how I was afraid to embrace all my identities, being someone who was Black and not Black, right? And what does that look like when I'm in spaces with other Black people, or when I'm in spaces with white people? So I want you to take a second, and we are going to get grounded.
Mindful breathing. Close your eyes and rest your hands on your knees. Bring your attention to the touch of your body on your seat. Feel the weight of your body on your chair or cushion. Make sure that your back is straight and that you're comfortable. Take a few deep breaths. While you're breathing deeply, relax your shoulders, your stomach muscles, the muscles in your face, your hands, and your legs. Let go of all the tightness in your body. Now bring your attention back to your breath. Notice what it feels like as it enters through your nose, goes down through your throat, filling your lungs, and back out through your nose. Notice your stomach and chest rise and fall each time you breathe in and each time you breathe out. And just allow your breathing to be natural and relaxed. Now bring your attention to the feeling of your breath in your nose. Feel your breath as it comes in and goes out. Just focus on this sensation, paying attention to each time you breathe in and each time you breathe out. As you inhale, maybe your breath feels cool. And as you exhale, maybe it feels a little warmer. When your mind wanders, or if you become distracted, just notice what's going on in your head, and then gently bring your attention back to your breath, going in and out. Focus on the feeling of your breath and allow thoughts and feelings to come and go in the background. Now gently bring your attention back to the touch of your body on your seat and open your eyes.
Is everyone good? Are you coming back to me? How are you feeling so far? I always feel like it's important to be mindful and take a moment to pause when we talk about race or privilege or our identity, who we are, where we come from, because sometimes it's just heavy stuff. So in the chat, tell me how you guys are all feeling in this moment. So just kind of shake it off. Keep breathing. If you need more of those moments, take them. All right. So next we're going to talk about recognizing white privilege. So recognizing privilege. As we outlined before, recognizing your privilege actually requires you to own who you are and say those things out loud. That to me is so hard sometimes. It's hard because I have to acknowledge, and sometimes I don't want to acknowledge things that are traumatic to me or bring up my past or make me feel uncomfortable. But I'm starting to learn how to own all of that in my story to others and how I actually show up vulnerable and unapologetically me. So yeah, are you saying those things out loud, not sheltering them or acting as if they don't exist? White privilege is the unseen, unprotected, unconscious advantage over others. Not having to adjust who you are in order to get ahead, be seen, have a voice, or uphold the standard. Do you all feel like this is a true definition of white privilege? And if not, tell me what you think it is in the chat. How does it resonate with you when you show up at work, when you are showing up in spaces where people don't look like you? Hey, Sheila, I would ask you, how would you define standard? What do you think the standard would be? I agree, Julie. It is definitely seen if you're looking for it. I like that, Sheila, the culture. I think it's a norm, right? Like, in all honesty, being someone of color, being a Black woman, however you want to see me, I don't think I ever really realized that other people would feel like they had power over me or over other people. And it's just shocking to me that even now, in a world where so many people have fought for us to be free or to have privilege to be in spaces, that we would still be having these conversations or people thinking that white privilege is not real. So in order to recognize it, you have to acknowledge it, right? So for many, white privilege has an invisible force that white people need to recognize. It was being able to walk into a store and find that main display of shampoo and pantyhose were curated towards your hair type or skin tone. Right now in the chat, have you ever gone to several stores for your shampoo, your conditioner, your hair gel, that those clothes you want to wear, that specific shirt you was looking for, you thought you can go to Walmart, but you had to go somewhere else. Tell me in the chat, when have you experienced that? Or have you experienced that? And what does it make you feel like? Super vulnerable answers in the chat. Thank you for sharing. So to continue, it says, it was being able to turn on the television and seeing people of your race widely represented. It is being able to move through life without being racially profiled or unfairly stereotyped. Those all impact people of color and our mental health, right? Like, what do I want to share? What do I feel? How can I say it? Can I say it? Am I gonna offend someone? Like those are things we think about all the time. I mean, I know I do. I wonder if I'm okay to say certain things. I wonder if I do say them, how people will feel about me. Then I'm like, do I care about what people feel about me? And the reality is we have to kind of stop caring what people think about us and show up authentically, unapologetically, who you are in that moment, and people will take you for who you are. And if they can't, that's okay. Yep, following you around the store, had that happen to me before. It doesn't feel good. And then you come off all crappy, right? And they're like, oh, sorry. And it's like, no, like you knew what you were doing when you were doing it. You know, how would it feel? How would you feel if I was following you around? So this image, I think it could be used when acknowledging white privilege. Another way to do that is the 4 eyes of oppression. Racism, white privilege, all of those things are deep, right? Like deep. So this analogy of this knapsack is like so powerful. And I think even though it's a good like symbol or image of what it looks like, it's like, are you owning that though in spaces? And if you're not owning it, back to Michael Yates' video, it's like, we got to have a whole nother conversation, because you're impacting people and the way that you make them feel, and you shouldn't be in a position to make people feel that way. So again, in the chat right now, if you had to tell me what was in your knapsack, what would you say? Yes, I will drop the link to the video. Oh my goodness, I keep losing the chat, you guys. Oh. Here we go. The one thing I don't want anyone to feel is ashamed. You have power in what you are aware of and what you acknowledge and what you allow other people to do when you have that power. So for those in the chat saying you're ashamed, I just want you to own who you are and how you can show up in that space and not be ashamed of the things that other white people have done or that you may have done, right? Like you can show up right now today and say that I'm going to change the way I move forward and how I treat people, how I show up in spaces, how I am encouraging others, and how I'm using my own power and my own privilege. We all can do that, no matter what race or ethnicity. We all bring things to the table. I mean, I think that's what's so great about intersectionality and really diving into all of who you are. And when you can do that, you can really understand how you can help yourself around your mental health, your well-being, and so much more. In that ownership, in that transparency of self, it can be so powerful. It could be a game changer. There's a question that says, what if you struggle with recognizing your privilege or really don't believe you have any? I will send a video out. I recommend, it's a short video, but it helps you understand like the deeper dive. So like internal, institutional, like it goes really, really deep in around privilege. I think it's all a struggle for you to recognize it. It's things about me that I have privilege of that I struggle with. But again, I have to own that. You got to look in the mirror and say like, who am I? What what have I done to people? What's my attitude towards others? Like, and really, really own that. And it takes a lot to own it. It takes a lot to be able to show up in that and say that you need help, or say that you don't see it or you need help recognizing it, right? It's so many resources, so many tools, so many people out there with this information. But if you're not willing to own it yourself, like that has to happen first. So I will say there's somebody that says, I did not see segregate. I did not see how segregate. Wait, I did not see how. Oh, I did not see how segregated my community was growing up. So for me, I really didn't either. Like I grew up in a decent neighborhood. I mean, again, but that's my privilege, right? Like when I say that out loud, it's like, dang, I did have the privilege to have my parents drop me off at school. I didn't have to worry about taking the bus until I went to middle school. It's so many things around that. And sometimes we don't want to see what the world is showing us. I think that's a whole nother thing too, right? It's like, we don't want to see it. I didn't want to know that like people were looking down on me or thought they were better than me. So I just stayed this way. I chartered this course to like not allow those things to bother me. But I think later on, because I didn't acknowledge those things, it did bother me. And it's why I do the work I do today. Why I want to be very much embedded in identity and race and DEI work and all those things, is because I kind of came to that acknowledgement of like, I didn't want to see those things. And why didn't I want to see it? And it just came down to traumas and things that I did see, and I kind of sheltered those things away. And I think that's a lot of the times what we do is we deal with these traumas and we bury them. And we can't live that way. We got to own all of that mess, like all of it, and be okay in it. It's not for anyone else to judge you on. It's for you to be able to show up and be willing to put the work in. So I have 2 questions that I'm going to have dropped in the chat. The first question is, what does it mean for us to have multiple intersecting identities where we see, what does it mean for us to have multiple intersecting identities where we experience some privilege and some oppression? It is coming to you guys all in the chat. What does it mean for us to have multiple intersecting identities? When we experience privilege and oppression. Someone says it means that we have a lot of work to do. We do have a lot of work to do. The intersections help us work on multiple issues together and build equitable policies and practices if, and that's in capital, we want to, and if, again in capital, we acknowledge our privilege. I love that. Depends on the situation, but can prove to be beneficial at times, and then others can create conflict and shame, I think. Tell me more about that. Tell me more about conflict and shame in that. I think it's exhausting. I feel ashamed of my privilege, but also want to feel entitled to being seen because of my disadvantage. Tell me more about what your disadvantage is. I appreciate you guys sharing. So if I'm around others who look like me, have similar backgrounds, but don't have the same privilege, but mine is loud and clear, it can make me feel ashamed of my, make me feel ashamed of the privilege I have. I can resonate with that for sure. Oh, absolutely, I totally forgot about that. Thank you. All right, thanks for sharing that one question. My second question is, how can you protect your mental health when you understand your privilege and identity? And we're gonna drop that in the chat too. How can you protect your mental health when you understand your privilege and identity? How can you protect you? I have a great therapist too. Confide only in those you trust. That was hard for me. I didn't trust anyone. And I think I had more trust in someone who didn't know me, who wasn't going to judge me, than I did in people that have known me for years, which is super tough, right? You got like your best friend or even your spouse or significant other. And sometimes you can't even show up with them all the way through and through because of things that you have, you know, a barrier with. Consistent reinforcement and finding a support system. I think self-acceptance is huge. I think being able to take full ownership over you and what you need. My mental health is tied up in my sisters and brothers not being oppressed, so I need to do social justice work as a form of protecting my mental health. It's healing. I love that. Uplift others. Sometimes it's easier to share with someone you don't know and plan to never see again, like someone on a plane. I have had so many conversations with people on a plane and just felt good. It's like the energy and the connection, right? And then again, to your point, I never have to see them again. I think too, we have to realize that we don't have to feel bad about that, about like trust. I think that's a part of your understanding. It's a part of ownership. It's a part of stepping forward and knowing what you actually need to fill your cup and fill your soul. I think we all miss those opportunities to connect with strangers. Absolutely. We're connecting today, Julie. I hope your cup is getting full and filled up. We do. We just need more people that are just willing to connect and feel good about who they are. Genuineness is for sure. I always say genuine and authenticity. I need that through and through. And sometimes we can tell when people aren't being authentic. But we can't allow everyone that we put in these categories to think everyone's against us or people don't want to support us. We have to use some discernment in that. So thank you guys so much for sharing. I'm gonna go to the next one. So we're gonna talk, the final section is about mental health. So to tie it all in, I spoke a little bit about the 5 faces of oppression, and I will be sure to like put links and things in because you can go so deep. Like this is like deep work. But it's a lot of perspective in this work, and it allows you to just see the bigger picture. So the 4 faces of oppression is exploitation, marginalization, powerlessness, cultural imperialism and violence, and domination. We have to think of all of those things when we're talking about privilege, when we talk about entitlement. Some of those things are embedded in those 2. And in order to develop and account for justice that overcomes both respects, but group differences is important. I think being able to check your intersectionalities and who you are, your identities, and see if any of these are a part of that. For me, there was so many times I felt powerless, and sometimes I still do. Marginalization, I resonate with, especially when I was homeless, especially when I lived in I would say it was like, it seemed like an abandoned building. The roof was coming in, there were mice. It was just not a good experience. And so many people had so much to say about that and never were willing to really help me. And I didn't understand why. So just take those 5 things in. I will put a link in that I think is really beneficial to go deeper into this work because it is deep work. And it is powerful to understand it and know it as it relates to privilege and entitlement. So how does privilege affect our mental health? it can be huge on our mental health. We can talk about traumas. We can talk about being Black in America and what that looks like. Even if you are not directly affected, you kind of are, right? Like if I am married to a Black man, I worry about him every day. Every time he walks out this door, every time he is leaving, that is a drain on my mental health because I am worried about him and how the world sees him when he is out. Why does it have to be that way? I will never know. But that's why I have a therapist. That's why I talk to someone. I journal. I write these things down and I express those things to him. Right? So, what are the impacts on our mental health? What are the impacts of being Black as it relates to mental health? Are we acknowledging and recognizing our privilege? Because if you're not, and you're just walking around like everything's okay, and I don't see color, and you think you have all this entitlement, and this is who you are, and this is what it is, and you've not acknowledged like how that's affecting other people, like that's hard. It's hard to walk around and fake it. And sometimes I feel like when we talk about privilege or entitlement, sometimes we fake it. We don't want to talk about those things. Like, what is that doing to your mental capacity? We also have to be aware of resources in our community, right? Or the lack thereof. Because sometimes things are not accessibly available to people who need help. So how do we make them available to people? How are we ensuring that therapy is like not stigmatized as something that we shouldn't take or go do? Do you ever feel isolated or feel like you don't matter? I've been there. I remember when I was homeless, the amount of freedom I had in my mind of like not holding the standard of what people thought I should have or be or do. And how was I going to still live in that when I got back on my feet? So in the chat right now, how do you feel like your privilege affects your mental health? I'm glad you mentioned the faking it. It's important for us to walk the walk and talk the talk. Absolutely. And sometimes it's just easy for people to fake it. I mean, if you're not ready to deal with something head on, if you're not ready to admit it, you'll fake it. You'll make up lies. You'll go into like this whole deep dive just so people don't judge you. Sometimes that's a coping. Like, it's to protect you sometimes. Like, let me just fake this because I don't want to deal with how they're gonna think about me, what they gotta say. I mean, it's just so much that comes with that. What else? It can be challenging if I don't maintain my awareness and remain willing to do the work. I love that. For most Black men, the expectation to be strong, hence refusal to seek help until late upbringing is key. I definitely agree with that. Counseling and therapy was not a thing. I have a younger brother who actually just recently is seeking mental health services. He did not want to admit that, but like my parents were not ones that were like, go seek help outside of this home. It was always like, what happens in this house stays in this house, and like, suck it up, you'll be fine. And that came from a place that we didn't always understand. But as you go through therapy, it just goes back to historical traumas, thinking about why your parents were saying those things to you. Awareness and having conversations of what it really means. Just because you seek help is not a sign of being weak or that you are crazy. Absolutely not. Sometimes you just need somebody to talk to. Sometimes you need to be able to say what you want to say and not feel guilty. And I mean, if that's one of the biggest takeaways, is that we live in a society where we just can't, we feel like we're not free enough to say what we feel. But my therapist always tells me, like, say how you feel without feeling guilty. Period. A therapist is good for your soul. Absolutely. Yes, I will send this PowerPoint out so that it could be reviewed, as well as the videos and links so that you can see those too. Learning that I can use my privilege to give someone else a voice is empowering. You can, you got it. It's a mind shift. It's just a mind shift. That's it. It takes the acknowledgement of it, recognizing it, owning it, and then just changing the narrative. How can I flip this and empower someone? How can I flip this and uplift someone? We all have so much to bring to the world if we just own our now, own our truth, own who we are. We just can make things so much better around us for our mental health, for the mental health capacity of others, and what we're giving to people. All right. Question. How is your soul now? Drop it in the chat for me. How is your soul now? Fired up. Hopeful. Thank you so much. This was a great session and fulfilling. I appreciate that. A lot better. Thank you. It's one step at a time. And just owning that in that moment. If you're not good, you're not good, and that's okay. Continuing to push through. I did not realize how much I needed this. I needed this too. I think it's easy for us to create these PowerPoints and these presentations, and then you got to walk through it and you feel it. You feel it. It's heavy on you. I instantly start thinking in my brain, like, am I checking myself? Am I acknowledging things that I want to acknowledge? Am I being true through and through? Staying positive. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to open it up for questions. I definitely appreciate your time, your energy, your engagement with me. It's super important to me. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat.
Yes, and if you have questions, you can either put them in the chat or you can send them through the Q&A option that you see at the bottom of your screen. And we can either type back or we can answer it live. All right, so it looks like we have our first question. So if someone is thinking about having a conversation about privilege and entitlement, what are some ways you suggest that this is done in hopes of having a productive dialogue?
Oh my goodness, can you like copy paste, drop that in the chat so I can read it? I'm a visual, I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay, I can do that.
If someone is thinking about having a conversation about privilege and entitlement, what are some ways you suggest that this is done in hopes? I would say it starts with you. if you are in that space, you are aware of privilege or any of those things, it starts with being vulnerable within you. So, for example, if you're getting ready to lean into a conversation around privilege, start the conversation with something that you've dealt with personally, right? Vulnerability is so huge in having these conversations and being able to allow people space. I think considering the whole brave space, safe space, like not judging them or letting them know like, hey, we're here to support you, but it's something that we want to talk through. So even for me, when I ask you all about what you see when you see me and you say Black, like I could be so offended by that, but it's what you see, right? And so you all allow me the opportunity to then tell you like who I am as a whole person. And so when you just operate in a space to give space and take space and allow people to have that platform or that moment is huge in order to have a successful, productive conversation. So I hope that's helpful.
Okay, and you have another question. So, in the workplace, how do you respond to a person who demonstrates white privilege?
um, I don't know if this is the right answer, but I'm going to live my own truth in this moment. I have had to talk to a colleague one-on-one and just say like, hey, this is what you make me feel like. And the reality of when I said earlier, like we have to be in a place that we own who we are, and I'm allowed to say how I feel without feeling guilty, and that I can be professional in that moment and just say, like, this is what you made me feel like based on these actions that you did, and I did not like that. And how can we make it better so that I don't feel like this in the future when we work together? And some things, I hate to say this, but some things just don't deserve its attention, because some people, there's a difference between intention and attention, and some things just don't require our attention, and that's okay.
Okay, and then it looks like you also have a raised hand. So,
I'm like, how do I see that? I don't know.
yep, that's okay. So, so for the session support, if you just want to go ahead and unmute them so they're able to answer or ask their question, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, you answered my question already. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so how do you remove your own personal feelings when addressing privilege with a non-person of color?
Ooh, can you drop that in the chat for me, please?
Yes, I can.
How do you remove your own personal feelings when addressing privilege with a non-person of color? I really don't think you can. I mean, in truth, like, I think it's a way to approach the conversation when you're addressing it. But I think in that moment that you're so riled up that you could come off a certain way that it may not be the proper time to say what you want to say. But we all feel a way when it comes to race and privilege and how people make us feel. So I don't think you can remove it. I think you need to take space for a minute and get your thoughts together and make sure you feel good about the approach when addressing it.
Okay, so another question you have, what has been the hardest part of having these conversations with others?
Lack of ownership. Lack of ownership. And I've been in positions where, again, we don't allow for people to feel good about being vulnerable. And that makes it hard to talk and hard to have conversations that we don't always agree with.
And I just want to read another message that came through the chat. A friend who is blind calls it a gift not to make assumptions or decisions based on a person's appearance, but how they actually act and interact with her.
I think I like that. I think assumptions, we make a lot of assumptions and we do them unconsciously sometimes, and sometimes we're just not asking the question, right? We need to stop assuming in society that we know what a person is dealing with, or that we know so much about them based on what we see, when we don't know nothing. We may not know anything. I used to assume a lot just based on people that look like me, or based on the fact that I was in the same class as someone, like, or any of those things. We just can't assume. You have to ask the question and never be afraid to ask, and just own that when you're asking. I mean, in vulnerability, it goes back to when I keep saying, hey guys, like, that is a habit. I am okay with you, telling me that you don't like that. And I'm also okay with saying, I respect that. I am working on that. If you got to chat that 300 more times so that I'm aware, I appreciate that, because you're meeting me where I'm at, but I'm not discrediting what you're asking of me either.
Okay, so we have about 6 more minutes before we wrap up the session. So if anyone has any additional questions, definitely feel free to send them through. That way Tonoa can go ahead and answer those. And while we are waiting for those last questions to come through, I just want to remind everyone that if you enjoyed Tonoa's amazing session, just be sure that you use the like session option inside of Whova if you're on the desktop platform. Or if you are joining us from your app, you can also use the 3-star rate button on the phone app as well. All right, so it looks like we got another question. So can you touch briefly on finding a therapist and finding the right therapist?
I have gone through several therapists before I found the one. For me, it was about energy. It was about being true to who I was and feeling comfortable. And the therapist that I had before, it was like, I feel like we don't vet therapists, right? We go in, you get it through your your EAP or your insurance, and you just go to that session. You feel like you have to settle. And I say, no. I had questions for my therapist. Like, after the first 2 therapists didn't work for me, I went in and I just had a deeper understanding of what I needed. I talked a little bit about who I was and where I was at and where I was trying to go. And the therapist that I have now totally respected that. And it was deeper than that consultation, 15 minutes, intake form, or whatever that looks like. I really went into my first session like, hey, I have questions for you so that I feel good about showing up here every day, and you feel good about showing up for me, and not being ashamed of having your list of questions. I think that you have to say what you're looking for. You have to own who you are and where you're at in that moment of why you're even seeking help. And the right therapist is going to say, I own all of that. I own who you are and what you need, and I'm here for you, and I'm standing with you. So hopefully that's helpful.
Okay, and one other question: how will the attendees be getting a copy of the recording, the slides, and the links?
I can oh, that question's for me. Let's see here. I wonder if I think I could put them in the app as a comment or an attachment. Oh, snap.
You can.
Okay.
Yes, you can.
Send it over, and so I'll download the session and I'll specifically put the link in for the video as separate, so you don't have to necessarily go through all the slides again if you don't want to. But I will put both of them in the app. If you don't have the app, here is my email address. and I will send them to you directly. You can flood me with your questions there too. Just let me know.
Okay, we have one final question. So what would be the biggest takeaway from today's session? There were so many good points.
I would say just own who you are, own every piece of you, even your flaws, even the things that you struggle with, own them, acknowledge them, and just do the work. Show up and do the work authentically, who you are in the moment, in the space in which you are. Because once you do that, we're all going to still grow. We're all still learning. We're all still trying to figure this thing out called life. And when life echoes us into a whirlwind of events, you got to get up, dust it off, and just keep going, because that's what's going to happen. It's inevitable. So I just say be encouraged, keep pushing towards the work that you guys want to get done. Always resonate with your why. Why are you showing up in spaces? Why do you do the work you do? Those are all important factors. And just be you, unapologetic, authentically true, through and through, in all spaces, no matter where you're at.
Okay,
I
thank
appreciate
you
you
so
guys
much.
so much for your time. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your sessions today. Remember to take space, give space, and do something to fill your cup up and take care of yourself.